Hi, my name is Brittany Hudson. I am a master's student at Wycliffe College at the University of Toronto, and I am studying a master's in theological studies and urban community development. When I was 7 years old, I was living in Malton, Ontario, which is a small community located within Mississauga, the city of Mississauga. So I was 7 years old, and my sibling and some of our neighborhood friends, we usually would ride our bikes around our street, which was a big circle. So we just loop it, and around that circle to when you got to the end, there was, or the other side, there's a high school that is located right there. And at the time, the high school was being renovated, and the whole space was being blocked off by a fence to ensure that people couldn't get in. So being little kids, we were fascinated by what was happening, and we decided to go by the fence just to see if we can get a peek of what's going on inside. And we were looking, we dropped our bikes by the front, and we're staring at this school under construction. We were, and to be honest, we were wondering if they left any like lab rats or anything like that in the building. That was our big fascination. We're just being kids, looking around by the fence, and an elderly man noticed us. He lived right in front of the school, and he noticed us, and he called the police. He calls the police, and the police come swinging by. And we had already left the school at this point, and we kept on with our normal business, and we're riding our bikes around the block. And the police officer notices us. We got on a quiet stretch, and he stops his car and he calls for us. And being children, being naive, not knowing your rights, not knowing what police can and cannot do, we engage in this conversation with this police officer, and he asks us where we're from, what we're doing around. This is the middle of the day, mind you. And we respond to all the things that he said. He asked us if we were in the school. We said no. And then he proceeds to show us the guns that he has in the back of his vehicle. And being children, not knowing what to make of it, we watched. And then he left, told us not to go by the school, and we were done. None of us died that day, and we just carried on with our normal business. I often think back to that experience. First, because a police officer had no right to speak to me, and secondly, because he was intimidating us by showing us his gun, or the guns that he had in his vehicle. Moving forward in my life, I moved to Brampton, Ontario, in a neighborhood that was predominantly white, and I stopped seeing the police officers. I went from a place where the police were circling around my neighborhood, constantly harassing us, manhandling us at many times, treating us like thugs and children that didn't know how to behave, to a place where I no longer saw the police. And then when I did see the police, they were just coming after us. I often look back at my situation, and I think, why was I seeing the police more often? Why were they more hostile with people that look like me? It wasn't like the kids, like the black children or the other racialized children weren't smoking weed, or that the white children were not doing the same thing. We were all doing the same thing, but we're all treated differently. Still to this day, in my neighborhood that is predominantly white, I see kids doing things that I know I could never get away with. And I always think about that. And in the realization that my 7-year-old mind realized that the police were not there to protect people like me. They were there to intimidate people like me and keep us in check. Policing it's not made to protect racialized people. The RCMP was only formed to clear land and remove Indigenous people off. Policing was not created to protect racialized people. And that's why I believe that there shouldn't be police in schools. There shouldn't be police at public gatherings to keep the peace, because they're only keeping the peace for a certain group of people. That's why I believe the police should be defunded. And that we should put our funds into services that actually help people, help racialized people, help people that are struggling and that are being impacted by systemic barriers. I often think we had police in our school, but my school in Malton didn't have a music program. We had police in our schools, but no one was actually learning how to do scientific experiments. And when I moved to a new neighborhood, we didn't have police in our schools, and everyone read music. We didn't have police in our schools, but our science gadgets were up to code. We need to defund the police.
Hello everyone, my name is Luis Mata and I work with the FCJ Refugee Center in Toronto. I am the Anti-Human Trafficking and Migrant Workers Mobile Program Coordinator with my organization. Today I'm going to speak about the situation of the migrant workers during the COVID-19 pandemic in Ontario. I'm going to start with a story that was told by two Mexican undocumented migrant workers recently. We met them when they were isolated, scared, confused, sad after they faced several challenges and lost one of his friends in southwestern Ontario in the area of Leamington. These two migrant workers came with a group of migrants from Mexico. They were recruited by the person who was offering them to come to Canada using the electronic travel authorization ETA to come here as a tourists. Some of them were offered to take training in English 1 month in a small school, paying close to $3,000 for that service. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic began, and then many places were closed, including these small schools, and the workers became out of the status and stuck, trapped in Canada without knowing what to do. Suddenly, another recruiter, Mexican recruiter, but living in Canada, established in Canada, contacted these two workers I'm talking about through the social media, through Facebook, and offered them to come to work in Leamington area, doing agricultural work, harvesting cucumbers, tomatoes, over 70 hours per week, $16 per hour, room and food and everything sounds very good. They accepted, but things started begin at the beginning being wrong because they were asked the day they were departing toward to Leamington, they were asked to pay $150 for the transportation. The second thing that was totally wrong, they were packed in small vehicles, small vans, minivans, with the capacity for, let's say, 7 to 10 people inside, but there were 13 to 14 workers packed shoulder to shoulder, traveling for 3 hours or more to Leamington area. Once there, this recruiter put the workers in hands of one contractor. This contractor changed totally the rules, put them in a rooming house for a house that had the capacity, let's say, for 7, 8 people. 24 workers were living in that house, packed, sleeping in bunk beds. no social distance, is in no healthy and safety conditions in the house, dirty, smelly. One of the toilets was broken, and they were asked to pay $400 rent each person, each worker. That means 24 people, each one paying $400 rent in that kind of living conditions. Also, the amount of hours in the work were different, and the payment totally different because they got deductions for transportation, for renting, another kind of no clear deductions. Then they were receiving not the same wage that they were offered in Toronto. Workers complained because living conditions, but also because one day inspectors came to the place of work. The place of work was in Kent Bridge Greenhouse in Chatham, Kent, Ontario, not far from Leamington. And in that place, there were around 300 migrant workers doing the labor. But among them, these 14 undocumented Mexican migrant workers were doing the same kind of work with the others. The others, all of them had a work permit, because they were coming under the farms temporary foreign workers program that bring agricultural workers every year. The workers complained because they were put aside, they were excluded from the COVID-19 test. And a few days later, the Mexican workers were feeling sick. One of them was totally sick, and they went to the hospital. One of them was uh, hospitalized. His name Rogelio. He passed away 2 weeks later, and the rest were released after being found that they were no in contact with the um, contaminated with the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the workers believed that they were bringing the virus in the way that asymptomatic, because some of them had fever and they were working very close, no social distance, with other workers, and they were spreading the virus around because they were going to the laundry place, convenience stores, pharmacies, the park, etc., socializing with many people, no social distance, and probably infected. Only when one of the workers, the one who was hospitalized, passed away, Rogelio, the rest of the workers became scared, confused, sad, and then they fled the place and they came to Toronto. That was the moment we met these two workers, and they were in distress, totally confused, and their well-being were destroyed. And what I want to say about this situation is that they were suffering at least several signs of human trafficking. One was the illegal recruitment. Canada has not regulated those recruiters. The second was the deception, and also the coercion, because they were coerced not to talk anybody about their immigration status, and because they were maybe being called by the police, and then the police can detain them and deport them. Then under the deportation threat, they were just coerced not to say nothing, and also they were overexploited, labor abused, at the end abandoned. Also, using as position of power those who recruit them, and also those who were given the contract work to them, including the supervisors of the farm and the owners of the farm. They didn't put attention about the safety condition for the workers in order to avoid them to be contaminated with the COVID-19. This is totally sad. Every year come to Canada about 80,000 migrant workers under the temporary foreign worker program, farms, and seasonal agricultural workers program. Also the live-in caregivers. those thousands of workers come here to take care of our kids or elders, to harvest our food, to process our food, to build, to make their buildings, etc., to work in factories, and they are in a very precarious situation because except for the caregivers that have many conditions, the others don't have pathway to the permanent residency. They don't have the opportunity to bring the families for family reunification. They don't have pathway to be established and regulated in the country, and make them many very vulnerable. Some of them, when are abused, they just leave the place, but they are unable to work in another place of work because the name of the prior employer is in the on the work permit they are holding, and unable to work and to work in another place with the same work permit. They become just out of the status. And many investigations said that at least 1 million migrant workers or migrants without status are living underground in Canada, living and suffering and possibly to be exploited and abused. This is a moment for Canada to show humanity, to show that this is a country, that this beautiful country, our country, is a country of love and human rights. This is the moment, this is a call from FCJ Refugee Center uh, to regularize the workers. This is the moment to provide an amnesty for them and to provide open work permits and permanent residency and opportunity to family reunification and to be established, because they have been contributing to our economy, and this is the moment to pay back them, given the status, because they have been suffering for many years underground, with lack of information, with language barriers, not enjoying the Employment Standards Act, sometimes working sick, creating problems. Is a public health situation, and but especially human beings away from the families, kids, wives, and husbands here alone, just working and being abused and exploited. This is the moment to show humanity and to give them an amnesty and give them permanent residency and open work permits.